Can you make pizza dough that tastes like it's been fermented for days in just 4 hours?
Here's an example of a margarita that I made with this dough, and it really tastes amazing.
Same day dough has a really bad reputation for being flat, doesn't have any spring, can't brown very well, and is completely flavourless. But that doesn't have to be the case. There's a secret ingredient to make this work, and here it is. Beer is essentially a pre-fermented liquid grain, which means lots of the byproducts from fermentation that we want in our dough is already here. That's alcohol, esters, so the nice smells that you get from kind of a fermented bread, a little bit of acidity, which is going to kind of mimic that sourdough flavour that you get from long fermented doughs, and also some sugars that are going to brown really nicely in the oven. Those are all the things that's missing usually from same day dough. So not all beer will do. The best thing for this recipe is a light lager. Peroni, being Italian, seems like a really good fit. You don't want anything that tastes really yeasty or that's got a very hoppy taste, because that's going to come through into the dough. You'll taste it in the pizza and it won't be good. The idea here isn't actually to make your dough taste of beer. It's to just make it taste like other dough that's been fermented for longer. So a beery taste isn't what we're after. Now, the second secret ingredient is actually a very small amount of wholemeal flour. Wholemeal flour can add a lot more bready flavour that you haven't got the time to develop with the same day dough. Just 3% of wholemeal flour in your pizza dough is going to give you a much deeper, nuttier, more flavoursome dough that's just basically more bready. Again, the sorts of flavours you get with a long fermentation. And it works because wholemeal flour actually has a higher amount of natural enzymes in it, which is going to help to break down sugars into more simple sugars that are going to help with browning and flavour once it gets into the oven. Again, this will take a lot longer to do if you were just using white flour. So step one is to get your beer open before we do anything, because this needs to get flat before we use it in our dough. So pour your beer into a glass and leave that for at least 15 minutes to start getting rid of some of those gases. You can give it a stir as well just to speed that up. I designed this recipe to be as easy to follow as possible, so it's totally beginner friendly, but also you can replicate it really easily. All the numbers are whole round numbers and you can memorize it. It's that simple.
So for dough nerds like me, you'll want a formula to follow. This just means that you can use any amount of flour to make however many dough balls you want using these percentages, and you can always follow the recipe. So it's 100% total flour to 65% liquid, 3% salt and 0.6% instant dry yeast. Now remember, when it comes to yeast, there are loads of factors that are going to affect this, mostly the temperature of your room. So best bet is to use a calculator like the one I'm showing you on the screen, and that will help you get the exact amount of yeast that you need. Okay, so for this recipe, you want 970 grams of 00 flour or bread flour, 30 grams of wholemeal flour, 390 grams of water, 260 grams of light lager, 30 grams of sea salt, and 6 grams of instant yeast. We're going to start with our wet ingredients first. That helps to mix things together without getting big clumps of flour stuck to the bottom of your bowl. So get your water, all of the water in the bowl first of all, and then weigh out your instant yeast. I've got these special jewelry scales, which helps me to weigh out things when they're just super light. And I like to put a bit of kitchen towel on it just so that the yeast is easy to pick up and put into the bowl. Give that a super quick whisk, and then to that go in with your flour. Now I've got my bowl sat on scales, so I can just start adding more and more ingredients into the bowl and just weigh it out as I go along. So I'm now going in with the wholemeal flour, and then get in with a wooden spoon, or if you've got a special dough whisk, that's also great, and start to mix things together. Put your dough to one side and let that hydrate while you weigh out your salt. It's also good to let flour to hydrate without salt, because salt does change the way gluten behaves. So get your salt weighed out now, add that, and then lastly the remaining liquid, which is your beer. Get that all mixed up really, really well. Make sure there are no clumpy bits and get all of that flour hydrated.
Super. Cover this up with either a bit of cling film or just a damp tea towel for about 20 minutes, and then we're going to move to the next stage. All right, we're back. It's been 20 minutes, so you can uncover your dough, and it's time to do some kneading. So you're going to wet one of your hands, and then start to go into the bowl, and you're going to stretch it a little and fold it over itself. Just keep turning the bowl, stretch a little bit, fold it over itself. Just keep going like that. Next step is to just dust your work surface with a little bit of flour, not a lot because you will change the hydration of your dough, so genuinely just a tiny little bit, so that it doesn't stick completely to the work surface. And then we're going to knead it just a little bit more before we leave it for bulk fermentation. So literally just a very light dusting, that is it. And what's going to help massively to be able to kind of work with this dough is going to be a bench scraper. A little bit of plastic like this is going to be an absolute lifesaver when it comes to working with a little bit of a sticky dough. Let's get this dough out onto our surface. So what we're going to do is knead the dough a little bit to try and develop some gluten, get it a nice springy texture. And we're going to do that with some slap and folds and using our bench scraper to build some tension in the dough. So get underneath your dough with your fingers. You're going to lift it up, and then as you lift, you're going to slap this side, the back of the dough, onto the bench and flip it over. So it's this motion here. And then you're going to get the opposite sides, and you're going to slap it and fold it. And after just a couple of folds like that, you'll see you've got much smoother skin beginning to form on the dough, and it's come together quite nicely. All right, bulk fermentation. So now that we've got a nice kneaded ball, we're going to pop it back into the bowl, and we're just going to cover that once again and leave it for an hour and a half. Let's ball it up. So you're going to get your dough and empty it onto your work surface using your dough scraper. The rounded part at the back of your scraper is really good for getting into the nooks and crannies of the bowl. So get that turned out. And now it's time to ball up. Now, if you're going to be super quick about this, you can just cut it in half with your scraper and then divide it into 3 parts. Now, that will lead to very different sized dough balls. So in an ideal world, you'll get your scales back out, and we're looking for anything between 275 and 280 grams. So with your scraper, cut into your dough. You're going to put smooth side down. You're going to check the weight there. So we're 307 on that one. So we would have had a much bigger dough ball than we wanted really. So you can just cut a little bit off. And we're at 277, that's perfect. So that's one dough ball done. We're going to shape the balls in a second, but first of all get your containers ready. I've got one of these, so I'm going to use it, but if you don't have a dough tray, any tray will do, you just cover it, or these individual plastic containers are really good. All right, so next step is to shape your dough balls. We've got them weighed out. Now we need to get them into a nice dough shape and add a little bit more strength and tension to the dough ball. The reason why you want to create tension is that's what traps air inside the dough, so that when you get it into the oven, you get that nice springy crust that's full of air, really light, crispy, tasty. So here's how you do it. So piece of dough, you're going to put it straight down on the workbench. If it's really sticky, you can wet your hands and that will help it to not stick a little bit. Or you can put a little bit of olive oil in your hands, but I'm used to it. So start taking little bits of dough from the edge, stretching it and pulling it into the middle, like so. Lift it over. Okay, and you'll be able to feel it actually get less and less sticky. Next step is to turn it so this open part is at the bottom, and then you're going to start to build tension by dragging, using the friction off the bench on the sticky dough to create a nice smooth top and a nice tight surface. All right, last step is using your hand to roll the bottom of that dough ball so you can seal up all of the edges. So I'm gonna roll it out like that. That's all pinched off now, nice and sealed. That's gonna go in my dough tray. All right, so these dough balls are all happy in their tray. We're gonna leave them like this now for between 1 to 2 hours, depending on when exactly you need them done by. You can still control the fermentation by warming up the temperature of the room, by using the oven, for example, just with the light on, don't actually switch the oven on, or by putting it in the fridge to slow down the ambient temperature and slow down fermentation. So the dough balls are ready. I'm going to show you them now. They've relaxed. They're looking really nice. And they smell really good too. So next step is to assemble our pizza. Today I'm just going to make a simple margarita. And for that, I've got just a tin of tomatoes. Muti is a really reliable brand. Any San Marzano tomatoes are going to be great and are much more traditional for Neapolitan pizzas. You can get really caught up trying to find the best quality ingredients, but use what you've got. Taste the tomatoes, that's the best way to know if they're good quality or not. And if you think they're a little bit acidic, you can always sweeten it very slightly with a bit of sugar or honey. But yeah, tomatoes, fresh mozzarella that I've just cut into Napoli chips. So that's just the rough size of them. They're probably about just 10mm wide strips. I've got some grated Parmesan cheese and I've got some fresh basil as well. Just gonna open up the tomatoes, add a pinch of salt. I've got some semolina flour, fine semolina flour, that I'm gonna use to stretch out the pizza. And I've got my dough scraper from earlier that I'm gonna use to get my dough out of the tray. So taking a little bit of flour like this, what you're gonna do is get down to the edges of the dough ball, like that, just detach it from the tray. Lovely. And then just get underneath it and lift it out like that. And then straight into your semolina. Put the lid back on so that the rest of your balls don't dry out. Okay, so I'll just get this dough ball covered in semolina. I'm going to start by making sure I keep it nice and round. And then next, you're going to push from the center out to the edges, leaving about 1 centimeter or 2 centimeters, depending how big you want your crust, of space that you're going to push your air towards. So just make sure there's plenty of flour underneath, nice and round, and start pushing down and out to the edges, like that. Now it's really important that you press the dough ball into the flour. It might seem excessive, you might have heard you don't want too much flour at the bottom of your base. That's absolutely true. But at this stage, primarily, you need to make sure this pizza's not sticky. If you've ever had a pizza that won't come off the pill and just creates a massive mess when you try and launch it, it's because this stage wasn't done properly. Now here's how you make sure you don't get too much flour underneath. Once you've opened up your pizza so that the base, you can just fit your hand inside nice and comfortably, you're then not going to use any more flour, okay? So you're going to move all the flour to one side and then you're going to stretch your pizza out. So as a beginner, the easiest way to stretch out your dough is to get your right hand and just gently rest it on your pizza, careful not to squash the crust. And with your left hand, you're just going to gently, keeping your thumb over the top and your fingers underneath, just going to gently give it a light tug and then put it onto your hand and make like half turns like this. Okay, and your pizza will start to stretch out quite nicely, quite quickly. Next step is to take the dough and put it on the back of your hand, and like that you're able to stretch it, not too much, focus mostly on the edges, and you've got yourself a nice sized pizza. Okay, you don't assemble it on the pill. You can get away with it with a wooden pill, but I've got metal pills, and it's not the way professionals build pizzas. Okay, you're going to build the pizza on the bench, and then when it's ready, you're going to put it onto the pill and put it in the oven. So we're going to go on with our tomato sauce. I'm going to do 2 tablespoons. Next step is to go in with some hard cheese. You can use Parmesan, Pecorino, Grana Padano. Honestly, it's so underrated the amount of flavour this adds to your base, and I like quite a lot of it. So you can put some on before the cook and you can finish some off on the top of the pizza afterwards if you like as well. Next is some basil leaves. Put the basil down underneath the cheese so it doesn't burn, but I like quite a lot of basil and I like it underneath the cheese. And then go on with your mozzarella. Spread it around evenly. The aim of the game with a Neapolitan pizza is not to cover the entire base with cheese. It's not a New York style. You want kind of distinct pools of cheese, and you want to see the base as well when you're doing it. All right, last thing is to drizzle on some olive oil. There we go. Perfect. All right, pills. I've got this very large 16-inch pill from Uni. It's perforated, which means if there's any flour underneath, it's going to fall off before it goes into the oven, so it doesn't burn on the stone of the oven. Before I pick this pizza up, I'm just going to get a little bit of flour and just sprinkle it very lightly on the edge, and then brush it around so that it's kind of evenly dispersed. As you can see, there's not a lot of flour on there at all, but it's just going to double check, just going to make sure that this pizza doesn't stick when it gets onto the pill. Now I can feel that that pizza is a little bit sticky. It's sat on the bench a little while, so we're going to add a little bit more flour. All right, that's perfect. Now, you want to make sure the pizza moves really freely on your pill, because otherwise it's not going to slide off and stay in shape when you put it in the oven. So this is 16-inch and my stone is 12-inch, so I'm not going to go to the limits of the pill. I'm just going to stretch it out to about 12-inch pizza, keeping it as round as possible. And I like the look of that. So over to the oven. So we're outside, it's freezing cold. Got the pizza here ready to go in. I'm gonna go towards the back, give it a little shake, and then straight out like that. And I'm gonna go with my turning pill. Gonna go under the pizza now and turn it. Check out how that base is cooking, lovely. Nearly done. Getting a little bit extra colour. And that's it. So our pizza is done. The underside is nice and crispy. Have a look at that crumb structure. That's seriously good pizza. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, then please like and subscribe. Also, head to the Pizza Inferno website. You'll see a link in the description and you can download our free quarterly magazine. We'll be pumping it with content like ebooks and things. Thank you for watching.